It was a Sunday afternoon when I went out to get the mail from the mailbox. Among the bills, I found an envelope I didn't recognize. It was from a company called Biogen and was addressed to my 11-year-old son, Tommy. I went inside, laid the bills, ads, and junk mail on the table, then picked up the strange envelope and went to the backyard. Tommy was back there kicking a soccer ball with one of the neighborhood kids. He's on a soccer team now and is always playing. The kid's a fanatic about it. I signed him up when he was 8, and he's loved it ever since. Before he joined the league, I didn't care much for soccer, but many of his friends were playing, and he wanted to join a team. I attend all his games now and have come to appreciate the sport. Football is still my sport of choice, even if I never played it much. The truth is, I wasn't very athletic in school. I watched him working the ball with his foot, bouncing it in the air a few times, and then effortlessly flicking it to his buddy. I have to admit, he is getting good and seems born to play the game. His coach even suggested I get him into a soccer summer camp to enhance his ability. I had some money saved up and Emily and I were thinking about it. I called him over. "What's up, Dad?" he said, running over, smiling and sweaty. "You know what this is, Tommy?" I asked, showing him the envelope. He seemed to recognize it. "Let me see," he said, ripping it open. He took out a 3-page document and said, "It's a gag gift Mrs. Miller gave us at Jack's birthday party." "A gag gift?" "Yeah, some test to see where your family's from. Jack Miller is one of our neighbors down the street." He quickly scanned the top page, then handed it back to me. He didn't seem very interested. "Is that all, Dad?" he asked, anxious to get back to his friend. "Hold on, she gave you a test?" "Yeah, it was pretty stupid. We spit in a tube and then she sealed it. We were all laughing about it. I forgot about it, but I guess she sent it in. It was obviously the results of a DNA test you take and then send away in the mail." I read over the results. "So Mrs. Miller gave you this?" "Yeah, she got one for Jack and thought it would be fun to give them to all the kids at the party." I looked at it for a few moments and said, "You sure this is your test?" "I think so. My name's at the top." "Mrs. Miller said it is." I scowled. Tommy's name was at the top, but the ethnicity was all wrong from what I knew. Emily and I are mostly Irish, with a little English and Scottish mixed in. This shows Tommy's part Irish, English, and Scottish, but he's also part Spanish, North African, a small percentage of other European areas, and a bit of Middle Eastern. I wondered if they got his results mixed up with another kid. "You say Mrs. Miller gave you the test?" "Yep, she said she would mail it in, and we'd get the result in a few weeks." Tommy saw the perplexed look on my face and asked, "Is everything all right, Dad?" "It was just for fun, you know." Sure, I know. Let me hang on to this. I'll give it back to you later." "Okay, Dad," he said, and ran back outside to play. What the heck? This can't be right. I went to the address book my wife keeps on the desk, found the Miller's phone number, and called their house. "Hello? Hello, Jane. This is Mark Watson, Tommy's dad from down the street." "Oh, hi, Mark. Thanks for inviting Tommy to Jack's birthday party a few weeks ago." "Of course. Tommy's a nice boy, very well behaved. I'm glad he could come. Listen, we got the results back from Tommy's DNA test. Did you give him this test at the party?" "Oh, yes. I'm glad the results got back so quick. I thought it would be fun for the kids to find out their heritage. They weren't expensive, so I ordered half a dozen for his friends so they could all have some fun with it. And you gave him the test. I mean, he didn't do it himself, right?" "That's right. I helped all the boys with the test and mailed them in. Is everything all right, Mark?" Yeah, fine," I muttered, trying to sound nonchalant. "Well, okay. Thanks for the test. Tell Jack happy birthday for me, okay?" "I will. Goodbye, Mark. Goodbye." I looked at the test again. How could this be? We don't have any Spanish or North African blood in either my family or Emily's. At least I didn't think so. Suddenly a bad thought hit me. I hated to think it could be true. I called Emily's sister Linda anyway, praying I was wrong. "Hi, Linda. Mark here." "Oh, hi, Mark. What can I do for you?" "Just wondering when we're going to see you again." "Good gracious, Mark. You make it sound like I'm a stranger," she laughed. "I was just over at your house 2 weeks ago for dinner. I saw Emily on Monday when we went shopping." "Oh, that's right. Well, you're welcome anytime." "I know that. So, how have you been doing?" "Okay lately?" "Yes, just fine and dandy," she chirped. After a moment, she asked, "Is that all you wanted to know?" I blurted out, "You ever see Frank anymore?" "Frank?" She snorted. She was quiet for a moment, then snapped, "He's not my favorite subject, Mark. I thought you knew that. Oh, right. He's been out of my life for years, and I have no interest in having him around again, ever. I thought you knew that. I know he's an a-hole and treated you like crap, so you're still keeping him at arm's length. I guess you know where he's at now? I have no idea. He can go to hell for all I care. I guess you're right. Where's he from anyway? I always thought he looked a little Spanish or something. What she said next hit me like a punch in the gut. Maybe a little, she agreed. His mom was born here, but you're right. She does look a little Spanish. His father's an immigrant from Morocco, or is it Algeria? Something like that. I'm not sure. Whatever. I don't care. What's this all about anyway? Nothing. Just making conversation, I replied with a catch in my throat. I covered the phone so she couldn't hear how choked up I was. When I didn't respond right away, Linda asked, "Mark, you still there?" "Yeah, sorry, just had to cough." I cleared my throat and muttered, "Just wanted to call and say hi and see you if you're mad at me or something." "Mad at you, you idiot? I might be upset with you or my dumbass sister, but I'll never stop loving my sweet little nephew and my beautiful little niece. He'll always love them, I know. You're a great aunt, and we all love you too. I'll speak to you later, Linda, and don't be a stranger." "Never happened, Mark. See you." I suddenly had a bad feeling in my stomach, but there was no way. Emily would never cheat on me, especially with that Frank. She didn't like him even before he and Linda split up. He was a slimeball, and everyone in our family knew it. He fooled around on Linda right up until he got caught in their bed with a neighbor's wife. Poor Linda was a basket case up until their divorce. I looked out the window at my son, kicking the ball with his friend. He had really shot up in height this year. His short-cropped hair was coarse and black as coal. He was also getting a nice tan. I always envied how easily his skin accepted the sun, going from white to tan without getting burned. Unlike Tommy, I never tan. If I'm out in the sun too long, I go lobster red in no time before it peels off with weird freckles and looks like crap. Emily's the same. She never lays out in the sun, which is great because I love her pale white body. I tell her to never worry about getting tan. We always take plenty of sunblock whenever we go to the pool or the beach. I hated to consider it, but a seed of doubt was planted. I began to consider my son's looks, and had to admit there were differences between Emily and me. The most notable was his height. Even at 11 years old, it was clear that Tommy would be lean and tall. He had an amazing growth spurt last year, and now is taller than any kid in his class. He's also getting more athletic by the day. On the other hand, Emily and I are not that tall, slim, or athletic. Emily was what you might consider a sexy, fun-loving Amazon when I first met her. She was in her last year of college, built thick and succulent with pale white skin and a cute round face. She never told me too many details, but I heard from various sources that she spent a lot of her time at school chasing frat boys and attending drinking parties. It was lucky for me she did, because that's how I met her. She and I still go out to bars, drink too much on occasion, dance, and have a blast. I'm just under 6 feet tall, 4 inches taller than my chunky wife. I weigh 220 pounds and am in decent shape. I work out a bit and jog around the park near our house once in a while. I never participated in organized sports. I was never good enough to be on a team, and you never consider me very athletic. I'm pretty average looking, certainly no stud, but not ugly either. I did well in school and got good grades. I like to work with my hands, so I'm now working in the field of robotics for a small robotics company in town. Everyone in the family knew the soiled reputation of Linda's ex-husband. I thought Frank was an arrogant prick when Linda first introduced him to me. He's obviously good-looking and he knows it. Even Emily mentioned how attractive he was, but he was such a conceited blowhard she couldn't stand him. Later, we found out good old Frank was a relentless skirt chaser and a serial cheater. Now that I was seeing my son in a new perspective, there was a resemblance. Maybe Emily had fallen for his slick line of bull. Unlike me, Frank was tall, dark, and good-looking. He towered over me by almost half a foot and was blessed with a chiseled, hard body like a male model. He was quite a good athlete in school, a local sports hero I heard, and he still played organized sports. I'm sure that's what attracted Linda to him in the first place. He's a slick-talking salesman selling used cars for a living. I particularly didn't appreciate the impolite way he teased my wife. There were lots of pointed jokes about her weight and other impolite subjects. To my surprise, Emily didn't immediately shut him down like I expected. She just tried to deflect his criticism and made it seem like a joke. We did go to their wedding. Emily was a bridesmaid, and I was an usher. The wedding was nice, but Frank made a fool out of himself at the reception. He got drunk and was hitting on so many women, Linda's dad had to say something. I wanted to tell him off, but since he was marrying Linda, I acted friendly to keep relations pleasant. It was difficult because he's a low-class buffoon with a loud booming voice and an annoyingly loud laugh. He would dominate whatever conversation was going on around him, whether he knew anything about it or not. Nothing could shut him up. "Mark!" Emily cried behind me, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. My wife entered the room and laughed when she saw I was startled. "What's the matter, honey?" she giggled. "Did I scare you?" "No, just yeah, I guess." She set the bag of groceries down, then came over, hugged me, and kissed my cheek as she pressed her generous body against my back. "Hey, lover," she sighed. "I was thinking about you while I was shopping." "Oh, really?" "Yes." She wrapped her arms around my waist and whispered, "I was thinking how I'd like to take you upstairs, throw you on our bed, and ravage my handsome husband today like you did to me last Friday night." "That sounds pretty daring," I chuckled. "With the kids around?" "Yeah, too bad," she sighed with amusement. "But if you're good, maybe I'll let you ravage me again tonight. That is, if you're up for it. I guess we'll have to wait and see." She laughed and slapped me on the butt. "You coy creep," she giggled. "Okay, we'll see. Just don't forget." She was smiling as she went over to the table and began unloading the groceries from the bag. "Be a dear, honey," she said sweetly. "Please go get the rest of the groceries out of the car while I fix some lunch, okay? And don't forget about tonight," she reminded me with a smirk. "I won't." This was typical behavior from my loving wife. Over the 12-plus years of marriage, we've enjoyed many expressions of affection like this. It's why the idea of her cheating on me was so preposterous. I'm crazy about her plump, sexy body. She can turn me on with a suggestive look, a warm kiss, or a tender whisper. I welcome her taking the initiative towards sex and love how assertive she is in our relationship. How can she be so loving if she's cheating on me? It doesn't make sense. Emily has always been very sexually expressive. She was so emphatic about her desires today, I nearly forgot about Tommy's DNA results sitting on the counter. I'm glad she didn't notice it. I slipped the DNA results into the desk drawer on the way out of the kitchen and went outside. Once outside, my thoughts were a million miles away. I was an only child. My mother suffered complications during childbirth and was unable to conceive after I was born. It didn't seem to be a problem, though, at least not for me. I had the full attention of both parents back then. Mom stayed home and took care of me in the house while Dad went to work. When he got off, he and I would play catch or throw the football around. Later, we'd eat dinner and then watch TV as a family. He'd take us to the park to play, and we'd go swimming at the lake in the summer. Unfortunately, he smoked like a chimney and died from an aggressive form of cancer at a relatively young age. He was older than my mother, but still pretty young to die like that. The odds just caught up with him. It was sad to lose him, but at 8, I didn't realize how much my mom took it extremely hard. We lived in an apartment, and after Dad died, we weren't well off at all. Mom didn't work, and in her depression after Dad's death, she wasn't able to take care of an apartment, pay the bills, and handle a young son by herself. We moved in with my Aunt Betty, who was a spinster her whole life. As Mom's depression got worse, my aunt would try to take care of her. I knew Mom had problems and tried to keep out of their way. That was how I lived my early life, basically without either parent. Dad was gone, and Mom was too depressed to pay much attention to me. Aunt Betty had a tough time making ends meet. My aunt had a doctor check out Mom, and he gave her medicine when she got too bad. But the fun, easy time I enjoyed before Dad died was over. Life became a dreary, lonely repetition of going to school, eating dinner, watching TV, and going to bed. I had a few friends and played with them on the weekends, but basically, life after Dad died was not a lot of fun. I got through high school with decent grades, went to college, and met my first wife, Sarah. She was a lovely young co-ed the same age as me, attending some of the same classes. We began dating, and life was suddenly wonderful again. I took classes all day and spent the rest of the time studying with Sarah, dating Sarah, and making love with Sarah. At the young age of 21, we got engaged, and she was the love of my life. A few months before graduation, Mom finally died, more from depression and a broken heart than any physical ailment. I went to the funeral with my fiancée and was surprised how few people attended. After being a shut-in for so many years, she didn't have many social contacts other than Aunt Betty and my grandma Edith, who was getting old. There were only a dozen or so people there. Sarah and I went back to school to finish our education. We both worked part-time jobs to afford a small studio apartment. We were great together and so much in love. We had sex every day, if not more, and made plans for when we were out of school and on our own. At graduation, I met her parents, and they were nice and friendly to me. No one from my family attended, which wasn't a surprise because other than Aunt Betty and old Grandma Edith, there wasn't anyone else. After school, Sarah got a job at an advertising agency and I worked at a trucking company. They had a supply system they were implementing and needed someone with software knowledge to program their delivery devices. It was a perfect fit for me. Now that we were both making money, we were planning to start a family and Sarah had gone off the pill. After so many hard years, life had now become beautiful for both of us. We were together for 3 incredibly wonderful years when, on the way home from her job, Sarah was run over at a stoplight by a drunk driver. She was killed in the most senseless accident I could ever imagine. We were going to have a baby, and she was pregnant with our first child when she died. The drunk was killed as well, and they couldn't save the baby. I was crushed. I went to her funeral and nearly collapsed on the coffin. Her father had to help me to my feet and led me outside, where I threw up. There were dozens of people there watching me stagger away sobbing. I was so distraught I couldn't even attend the burial the next day. I went through hell for the next 6 months, quit my job, lost my apartment, and was homeless for a while. Sarah's parents gave me money and tried to get me into therapy. They made appointments, but I never showed up. I know they meant well, but just seeing them reminded me of my dead wife. After a couple of times, I never spoke to them again. Later, I panhandled for liquor money and got food from a church that gave me a hot meal in the afternoon. I spent a lot of time passed out drunk. Aunt Betty somehow got hold of me and told me to come home and live with her and Grandma Edith. But I was so angry at the world, I couldn't. I remembered how hard it was for her to take care of my depressed mom and didn't want to put her in that situation again. I bummed around for a while, sleeping in abandoned cars or on porches that weren't in use. But as they say, time heals all things. It didn't heal the hole in my heart, but the longer I was on the street, the hungrier I got, and the more ashamed I felt at how I had collapsed so badly. A preacher at the church where I was eating supper began to counsel me. He got me a job in a supermarket, stocking shelves at night. That led to another job in a warehouse where, of all things, they had the same automated supply system I used to work on at the trucking company. Once my boss found out I could program their delivery devices, I was hired full-time. I saved some cash, got an apartment, and started to crawl out of my dark hole of depression. I was still drinking quite a bit to forget Sarah's death, but unlike when I was on the street, I now had money and had regained some pride. I also had some guy friends from work I could drink with, drinking buddies, if you will. We'd hang out on Friday nights at clubs, checking out chicks and getting hammered. One guy invited me to a frat party near a college. I had a great time, and they invited me back for another party the next weekend. That's where I met Emily. There must have been hundreds of people at the frat house. It was a pretty wild scene, and with all the hot co-eds running around, I wouldn't have even noticed Emily if we hadn't ended up next to each other in the beer line. I was nowhere near drunk, and she wasn't either. She was a big girl, overweight but not obese, with a creamy white complexion, shoulder-length auburn hair, and a colorful tattoo on her shoulder. She had a cute face flushed from alcohol. We were standing next to each other, waiting to fill our cups with beer. I started a conversation and found she was a fun chick, 3 years younger than me, friendly with a nice, pretty smile. After Sarah died, I wasn't going to get serious with any woman, but something about this big, rambunctious female with the tattoo intrigued me. We talked or yelled because the music was so loud and went outside to talk some more. She pulled out a joint and asked me if I wanted to smoke it. Of course I did. We got high and drank some more, smoked another one, and pretty much hit it off that first night. Before I left, I made sure to get her number. She said to call her. We went out after that and just kept seeing each other. I found out she was a little self-conscious about her weight, but I thought she looked great and told her so. I told her she was perfect for me because I love a big, pretty woman with curves and some extra meat on her bones. She heard that and smiled. Her blue eyes flashed and her cute face lit up. We couldn't get to bed quick enough. We had sex on our second date, and it was incredible. She's a very strong girl, and I was surprised how aggressive she was in bed. My first wife was slim and petite. We'd take time to kiss and use lots of foreplay, stroking and kissing before we started sex. Our lovemaking was slow and romantic. Emily was more direct. She'd make out with me and let me play with the goodies for a bit, but if she was horny and I took too long to get to the main event, she'd just yank down my pants and tell me to do her. We went out to parties and clubs a lot in those days. When Emily got drunk, which happened a lot, she'd get very horny. If we were out somewhere, it wasn't unusual for her to initiate something. At times, she'd just take me somewhere private, like my car in the parking lot, or out back of the club and tell me to screw her. There were many nights I'd find myself getting a BJ behind some restaurant. I wasn't used to such a demanding, assertive lover, but I wasn't complaining either. I adored her. To make a long story short, a few years after I came out of my shell when I said I'd never love again, I fell in love with Emily and asked her to marry me. Thank God she agreed. We had a short engagement and then we married. Looking back on my sad life, meeting her was the best therapy I could have ever asked for. I was 27, she was 24, and we had a big traditional Catholic wedding, thanks to her wonderful parents. Emily's from a typical Irish-American family. The wedding was held in her family's church, administered by the priest. I met so many of her relatives, I couldn't remember them all. We drank so much and sang Irish songs at the reception, it's a wonder we could even have sex on our wedding night. But let me assure you, we did. Her parents are really great people. They met me and welcomed me into their family right away. I appreciated them too. Even before we married, we ate dinner with them regularly. They paid most of the money for our wedding and even gave us tickets to a resort in California for our honeymoon, where I consummated my marriage dozens of times with my lovely Irish bride. I couldn't have asked for a better outcome to my life. I knew Emily was a hard partier when I met her. Hell, we met at a wild frat party, for Christ's sake. She told me a little about her college life, and I was pleased with her honesty. She didn't hide the fact that she dated a lot of guys before me, and until we were exclusive, she was still having sex with other guys. She said she did some things she wished she hadn't. I gave her a brief recount of my crappy life, but tried not to dwell on the worst parts. She knew I was married before, but didn't care about that. She was glad I could overlook some of her past rowdy history. The other guys she dated were mostly arrogant, entitled frat boys that were just trying to score. I was the first guy she dated that she could see getting serious with, settling down and getting married. I met her sister soon after we started dating. Linda is a very pretty girl, 2 years older and slimmer than Emily. We got along real well, and I liked her. She seemed just as high-spirited as her younger sister. Both of them could drink me under the table. It was then that I met Frank, Linda's longtime boyfriend. He was a few years older than me, and they were engaged. The guy was working in a gym as a personal trainer, and he was definitely buff. He didn't seem to care for me all that much. When we shook hands, I got the impression that he was an arrogant snob. I didn't tell Emily that. Linda loved him like crazy. That was easy to see. When we'd go out together, it was all about Frank. He's a big guy, had a big mouth, and loved being the center of attention. I tired of his tendency to dominate any conversation, no matter what. Linda would get drunk and hang all over him. She definitely had the same wild streak in her eyes that Emily had, but she was engaged to that tall, older guy, so she didn't go out party and get drunk as much as Emily and I did. Bringing me out of my thoughts, I heard Emily call us for lunch. I called Tommy into the house and Susan in from watching TV. We were all around the table eating as I tried to appear normal. Unfortunately, my facade of normality didn't fool my wife. "Everything okay, Mark?" Emily asked me cautiously, training her blue eyes onto my face. "Yeah, fine. You look a little tired, honey. You feeling all right?" she asked with concern. "Maybe a little tired," I lied. "It's been a tough week." "Really? Why don't you take a nap after you eat? I'll clean up." "Okay, maybe, we'll see." I was hoping she wouldn't ask me anything more. I couldn't help being distracted about the DNA results in the desk drawer. I was hoping to God that the results were flawed in some way. Taking Emily's attention from me, Tommy started talking to her about his soccer team. It was a relief. I'm normally pretty direct about issues that come up. Not as much as my no-nonsense, unreserved wife, but I don't like to beat around the bush. Trying to save someone's feelings usually costs time and money at work. If there's a problem with software or some supply issue, I get right to the point and address it immediately. This was different. It was personal, not business. I finally decided there was no reason to rush to judgment until I had a chance to think. Unfortunately, I was so fixated on Tommy's parentage, I could hardly sleep that night. I went to bed early, and Emily came up not long after. She acted very affectionate as she slid into bed. She kissed me and snuggled as she lay next to me. When I didn't respond to her affection, she got the message, kissed my cheek, and told me I'd feel better tomorrow. I tried to sleep, but that damn DNA test kept me awake. I couldn't figure out how it could possibly be correct. After I tossed and turned for an hour, Emily sat up and said angrily, "Are you going to jump around all night?" "Damn it, Mark, what the hell's the problem?" "Nothing. Probably drank too much coffee, honey. Sorry." "Well, go take a sleeping pill or something. I can't sleep if you're moving around like that all night." "I know, okay. You're right." I got up and went to the kitchen and had some water. Then I went to the guest room and fell asleep on the bed there. Except for when I traveled, it was one of the few nights in our marriage that we didn't sleep together. Emily didn't say anything about my absence from our bed, but she did eye me with concern as we ate breakfast. After breakfast, I went to the desk and got out the DNA results. I took it out to the garage, where I read it over a dozen times in private. The more I read it, the more I thought it might be true. Emily and I have had a wonderful 12-year marriage. We're going to have a 13-year anniversary in several more months, but there was a short time after we married when we had problems. We didn't argue before we were married that much, but not long after our honeymoon, we did have some disputes that turned rather ugly at times. I had no idea why she was so irritable, but for the first time since we were together, I got a taste of her harsh Irish temper. The gist of her displeasure was that she wanted to go out more. I liked to go out and party with her, but sometimes thought we shouldn't for financial reasons. I was working hard in those days, longer hours than I am now. Money was tighter, and we were living in a dumpy one-bedroom apartment. I didn't want to waste our meager resources on frivolous spending in bars. There were also a few times when I had to go away for work. My boss paid for each trip out of town because they were work-related. I had to take some classes on the latest improvements in robot technology. The robotics field moves quickly, and if you don't keep up, you quickly get behind. I was trying to do the best for our future family and needed to stay ahead. Emily wasn't happy and let me know in no uncertain terms that even though she was married, she was still young and wanted to have fun. She didn't appreciate my traveling without her. It was my 4th trip out of town when Emily hit the roof. I was working hard, and we weren't going out drinking as often anymore. She was already upset that our lifestyle had become boring, as she put it. But on this occasion, she made plans to attend a big celebration her family was involved in. She said her whole family would be there as well as a lot of her friends, and demanded I stay home and go there with her. She was bitterly opposed to me missing it. Contrary to her opinion, I couldn't see why I should miss this important class just to go get drunk at a party. I loved her family and knew it was a big deal, but our family's welfare was a top priority in those days. It still is. I couldn't see why she didn't understand that if we were going to have kids, and I know she was counting on that as much as I was. We'd need a bigger house and a better financial situation. I was up for a raise at the time and maybe a promotion. Being more educated in my field would help me attain that goal. We both knew having kids was important. Being from a staunch Catholic family like hers, children were a constant subject of conversation. I remember her parents, George and Norma, pestering Emily about it so much she told them to stop. They even asked me how many kids I wanted the night we announced our engagement. I can remember many times they teased us about having kids during family events. Some of her relatives used to joke that Emily had the right body for making babies, that she had baby-making hips, as they said. We all laughed at that. It was a pointed joke, funny, but we both knew they were serious. Actually, I was ready to get her pregnant on our honeymoon. My new bride was a big, buxom, beautiful woman, and I wanted nothing more than to knock her up and have a new baby to spoil. I know Emily wanted that too. That was one thing we talked about at length before we married, but she told me, and I agreed with her, that we should wait a few years until our finances were solid. I remember how poor I was when I was a kid and wanted better for my family. When she told me she wanted to wait a bit, I thought it was a sensible decision. Remembering those conversations gave me a chill. If she was being truthful with me about waiting, and I believed at the time she was, then how'd she get pregnant less than 6 months later? I was using condoms at the time because Emily had trouble with the pill. I didn't really like condoms, but they were less messy and complicated than other methods with spermicides and diaphragms. She had me using them from the time I met her, so I had to get used to them. That worked fine right until she let me know she was pregnant with Tommy. I know that no form of protection is totally foolproof. At the time, we just decided one of my swimmers somehow got past the condom and did the job. In any event, it was a blessed event for Emily and me, not to mention her whole family, who was thrilled to death. We celebrated the night we made the announcement with a wild sexual marathon, and I haven't thought a thing about it until yesterday. After breakfast, Emily got the kids ready for church. I made an excuse that I wasn't feeling good and told her to go without me. It wasn't a lie. My head was exploding with unpleasant scenarios about how Tommy's DNA results had come out so different than what I would have expected. I went back to bed as they got ready for Sunday Mass. When they were ready to leave, Emily brought the kids into the bedroom to say goodbye. Tommy hugged me and said he wished I felt better. My little princess, Susan, was all dressed up in her white Sunday dress and looked so cute I nearly cried as she kissed me. Emily kissed me on my forehead and told me to sleep, and maybe I'd feel better when they got home. I had already gotten up and eaten something. Emily fixed the kids some food, and they all sat down to eat. I joined them at the table but didn't partake in the meal. I listened with delight to Tommy chattering away about something and Susan giggling at something he was saying. Emily added her comments but was watching me out of the corner of her eye. God, I loved my family. The rest of Sunday I spent outdoors. I interacted pleasantly with Emily but tried not to get into any long conversations. I was afraid if I said too much, I'd get choked up and lose it. I played kid games with little Susan and her dolls. She loved that. I also kicked the ball around with Tommy. As usual, he was placing the ball easily while I was barely able to control it. He even did something he called a bicycle kick that sent the ball flying directly behind him. He laughed like crazy when it hit me in the head, and I couldn't stop it. The rest of the time, my son ran rings around me, and I could see the future talent in his game. Needless to say, I was a basket case at work on Monday. I was distracted by my thoughts and made a few stupid errors in my software programming. My boss noticed and asked me what the hell was wrong. I made some excuse, and he gave me the afternoon to think about it. He told me he needed me to concentrate on my job and to get my head out of my bum. I left work early and went straight home to think. I was surprised when Emily came home that day without the kids. Once Susan went to kindergarten and didn't need daycare, she went back to work for a financial services company as an administrative assistant. Her hours are flexible, which allows her to pick up the kids after school. As she walked in the door alone, she had a sober look on her face. "Where are the kids?" "They're at Linda's," she said without explanation. "You're home early." "Yeah," I sighed. She waited a moment for me to explain why. When I didn't, she asked softly, "Is there something bothering you, Mark?" I was sitting on the sofa, and she had moved in front of me as she spoke. I could see her eyes tear up. Her cheeks were flushed, and she had a very serious look on her face. At that moment, I had to make a decision. Should I lay my cards on the table or keep screwing around with my suspicions? I'd been driving myself crazy all weekend about what to do. Hire a private detective? A lawyer? Should I follow her around like an idiot, trying to catch her and her unnamed lover? Play some devious game to trap her into a confession, or go out and spend a fortune on surveillance cameras and audio recorders to document her suspected affair? Damn it, this is my wife we're talking about, the love of my whole goddamn life, not some simple-minded character in a weird Hollywood movie. Emily's no fool. She's the woman I've given my heart to for nearly 15 years, over 12 years in marriage, and the greatest relationship I could ever hope for. She's given me 2 kids that I love to death. Besides that, I'm no CIA spy or 10th-degree black belt from SEAL Team 6. I'm an average, honest, hard-working, middle-class guy who can't figure out what the hell's going on with the love of my life. I've had it. I'm so done screwing around with all my suspicions. No more games. It's time to fish or cut bait." During the awkward pause, Emily repeated, "I know something's wrong, Mark. Is there something we should talk about? Please tell me, honey." I looked her in the eye and stated, "Yeah, I think there is." Emily's eyes lowered to the coffee table. A tear ran down her cheek. I've never seen her look so sad, and it was breaking my heart. I wanted to hold her and kiss her tears away. I did everything I could to hold back my emotions. Before I could say anything, Emily opened her purse, took out a paper, and laid it on the coffee table in front of me. She sat down in the chair across from the sofa and asked quietly, "Does it have to do with this?" My eyes widened when I saw Tommy's DNA report sitting there. I glanced up at her and then back at that damn document. "Yes," I replied, feeling as bad as I had felt in 15 years. "I see you found it. I found it in the desk. Tommy told me about it yesterday at church. He said ever since you saw that report, you've been upset, and he didn't know why." I kept quiet. I didn't want to start crying. This was important, and I had to hold it together. "He said he wanted me to throw it away," she said, wiping away a tear. "I told him that I'd speak to you about it." "So what about it?" Emily pulled a tissue from her purse and blew her nose. She wadded it up and got another one and dabbed the tears forming in her eyes. "As soon as I saw it, I knew what it was about. I knew what you'd think. So I called Linda today. She told me you called and asked about Frank. I've been waiting to talk to you about this for a long, long time, Mark. I'm so ashamed, but I won't deny what happened. No way I can anyway. You're no fool, Mark, and you deserve honesty. God knows how long I've wanted to tell you, but I couldn't. Couldn't? That's rich. I'm your husband, Emily. No secrets, right? Sorry, I know that's no excuse. I've wanted so bad to tell you." She sobbed for a moment before regaining control. "I'll tell you everything now. I do love you, you know, but before today, I wasn't going to tell you until Tommy was a little older. Why? He's young. How could a little kid handle knowing you weren't his biological father? Don't get me wrong, Mark. You are his father in every sense of the word except one. That creep Frank is certainly no father. So it is Frank then? Yes, I made a mistake early in our marriage. I'm ashamed of it and completely disappointed in myself that I let it happen. But it did happen. And once I was pregnant, there was no way I could give up the baby. You know my family and the way I was raised. I just couldn't give it up. And I knew if you found out the truth, it could ruin our family." She sniffled, took a breath, then looked straight at me. "I needed to wait, Mark," she said with her voice quivering. I had to wait until Tommy was older. I had to wait until Tommy was old enough to handle it. I knew one way or the other, you'd be very unhappy. But I couldn't ruin his childhood with my betrayal. I just couldn't, Mark. You have to believe I never meant to hurt you or our family, even though I knew the truth may destroy us." "You may be right about that," I whispered bitterly. That statement shook her. She spoke so softly, it was hard to hear. I knew that creep would never be responsible. Certainly, he'd never be a father to Tommy, not like you, Mark. I knew you were the man for me almost the first time we met. Since our marriage, you've been the perfect husband for me, loving, hardworking, faithful, responsible. I love you so much. I knew Tommy would have a wonderful life with you as his dad. The alternative was trying to squeeze support out of that lousy creep I was with. I knew he'd never step up." Emily lowered her eyes and didn't speak for a minute. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the other room. "If my math is correct," I sighed, shaking my head, "you must have been screwing him right after our honeymoon. It was a few months afterward. You still screwing that a hole?" Her eyes narrowed and she scowled as she snapped, "Absolutely not. I had sex with him a few times and got pregnant with Tommy. After that, I didn't speak to him and never let him touch me again. I haven't seen or heard from that jerk since Linda and he divorced. I guess I have no choice but to believe you. It's the truth. I never want to see him again. You wanted to tell me about it?" Emily exhaled as if what she was about to say was very difficult. "I'd rather not, Mark." She took a few deep breaths and said, "But I will if you want. God, this is so hard." She suddenly cried. "I've been thinking and planning this conversation for so many years. The sorry details won't help one bit, and I know you won't be happy hearing them, but I won't lie to you, and I won't hide anything from you ever again. I owe you that much. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the sordid details of her affair. I was barely holding it together hearing her shocking confession. but I asked one question that was digging into my soul. I bit my lip and asked a question that I hated to ask. Now that I know Tommy isn't mine, at least not biologically, is Susan mine? I felt my heart pounding as I waited for her answer. "Damn it, of course she is, Mark," she said with an edge, adding, "Considering the situation, I don't blame you for asking. Let me show you something." Emily stood up and went into our den. I heard her opening some drawers, and she returned a moment later with a folder. She laid 2 documents on the table next to the DNA results. "I had both Tommy and Susan checked," she informed me soberly. "Those are DNA tests for both our kids. I had them done several years ago, even though I already knew the results. But I had them both checked because I knew when we had this conversation, this question would eventually come up." Emily pointed out a couple of charts on the pages. She had a relieved look on her face as she told me, "As you can see, Mark, Tommy has a different father, as you now know. But this page proves that Susan is yours." It suddenly hit me how long she's been preparing for this confrontation. I felt like a chump, an ignorant, unsuspecting chump. I was totally off balance now, being expertly played by a cunning, slick-talking adulteress, much like I felt about her a whole lover. I always knew Emily was an intelligent, calculating, determined wife. I never suspected she could be so cold and manipulative. "Let me assure you, Mark," she continued, "that after my terrible mistake after my affair, I've been completely yours. I haven't cheated or had any inclination to do so with any man. I spent a lot of time praying for forgiveness and hoped that God would forgive me. I prayed you could too. I tried to make amends to you and our family by being the best wife and mother possible. I hope you feel that I have, even if we can't get past this." Suddenly, her brave exterior cracked, her red face broke into tears, and she began to sob as she ran out of the room. I know it was hard for her to come clean, and I appreciated her honesty finally, but it didn't make me feel any better. I gazed at the papers on the table sadly. At least Susan's mine, I thought. Then I angrily snorted and mentally slapped myself. "Tommy is mine too, damn that witch." I cried out loud. "I love him." My tears fell fast now. I sobbed for a few moments. How did I feel? Might sound weird, but I was less angry than just numb, mixed with a perverted sense of relief. Sure, my wife was a cheating witch, but at least all my suspicions were verified now. Now I wouldn't have to wonder over and over, did she cheat? Didn't she cheat? Now I knew the truth. But the truth hurt big time. Should I throw things around the room, punch the wall, attack my wife, hire a hitman to kill my cheating wife's lover? My mind was spinning. I felt a little nauseous and couldn't think. I went to our bedroom and found Emily sobbing on the bed. "I don't know what to say," I said softly. She turned her head. Her eyes were red and filled with tears. "Oh, Mark, I'm so sorry. I love you so much. Please don't hate me." "I really don't know how I feel," I told her truthfully. "I know I'm a fool and did something terrible," she said through the tears. "The only reason I didn't tell you all this time was to give our son the life he deserved and a father that loved him. I would have admitted my sin eventually, please believe that. But as a mother, I had to give Tommy his childhood with a father that loves him and would teach him to be a good man. I was afraid that wouldn't happen if I told you before now. I guess you didn't trust me then. You're right, though. I don't know how I would have reacted back then. Nothing made me happier than when you gave birth to our son. My son. I was the proudest father alive. It was my dream of my life, and you gave it to me. So I guess both Tommy and I received the benefit of your deceit. I can see your weird logic, but you might be right. Oh gosh, Mark, I was caught in a dilemma. I loved you, but I had to do the best for our son. It was the only way I could imagine at that time. Keeping the secret from you was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was a nightmare to hide the secret all these years." She sat up in bed and grabbed onto my hand tight. "Please, Mark, if you can somehow open your heart and forgive me for being such a silly fool, I'll do everything in my power to help us through this. Anything, I mean it. I'll never stop loving you, and I know Tommy and Susan won't either. Please," I said, pulling my hand away. "I can't think about the future right now. I hope you understand that. This has been almost overwhelming. I need to absorb it and figure out how to sort this out." "Okay, that's only fair," she said, regaining control of herself. "I just want you to know that if you see it in your heart to forgive me and let our family stay together, I'll do everything I can to make it up to you. We all will." "What?" I blurted out. "We?" Emily's face suddenly went pale. and her expression froze. Her eyes were saucers as she watched me nervously. "What we?" I repeated. "You said we. Does anyone else know about this?" "Well, I had to tell Linda," she reluctantly admitted. "Linda? Oh, she knows about this," I cried in disbelief. My wife's head lowered for a moment, then she looked at me with pity. "I didn't tell her right away," Emily said softly, but she noticed Tommy's looks changing as he grew older. She knew her husband was a slick-talking Romeo and suspected I might be vulnerable to his line of crap. "So she knows everything?" "Yes," she squeaked. "We got drunk one night when Tommy was around 5. She began crying to me about Frank's affairs and how she knew he was cheating on her but wouldn't stop. She asked me straight up if I had done anything with him. I wanted to lie, but I couldn't." "So you told her about Tommy," I stated bitterly. She kept speaking as if she didn't hear me. Her eyes were staring into space, and she was speaking in a slow monotone as if reciting a speech. "I admitted that I fooled around with him before we were married." "My God, Emily," I cried in despair. "This just keeps getting worse." "Well, they weren't engaged yet, and we hadn't become exclusive either. I went out with him a few times while I was still in school. Linda got drunk and passed out on a few occasions, and Frank and I were alone in their apartment with Linda unconscious. He came on to me. He's a good-looking guy, and I was flattered by all the attention. I admit I gave in to his constant flattery and pressure, and we had sex a few times. That was before we were married? Yes, we were just starting to date. I was ashamed that I had betrayed my own sister, but it was too late at that point." "So you told her that?" "Yeah, I hated to, but we were both drinking heavily, and the liquor was like truth serum. When she asked me about Tommy and if Frank was the father, I admitted he was. I told her that I was angry with you for leaving me when we had that family reunion a few months after our honeymoon." "Christ, Emily, how could you be so stupid? That guy's a sleazebag. I know that now. He and I went out that night. I just wanted a night of fun and to have a few drinks. Linda wasn't around for some reason, and I was pissed at you. We hadn't been going out very often anymore, and I missed my irresponsible lifestyle. I mean, going to all the parties and the clubs. He took me dancing, got me drunk, then he took me outside and banged the hell out of me in the back seat of his car. I'm sorry, Mark, but that's what happened. I knew it had something to do with those training trips," I said dryly. "I knew you were upset with me, but I never suspected you'd cheat on me, especially with a jerk like him. I was stupid and drunk and regretted it afterward, but not enough to stop. No, I did stop. I didn't want anything to do with him after that night. He kept on calling me every time you left town. He would hit on me behind my sister's back. The guy's a born cheater and was relentless." "So that's when he knocked you up?" I asked, not sure if I wanted the answer. "Yeah. I was smashed, like I said, but not so drunk that I didn't make him use protection. Of course, he had rubbers in his pocket. He probably knew he was getting in my pants when we got into his car. I made him put one on before he did me." "So how did you get pregnant?" She lowered her head shamefaced and said I was pretty drunk, and it was late, so he took me home. Once he got me into the bedroom, he did me again. I don't remember much about that one. The next morning, I demanded he leave, but he wouldn't go without having me once more. I finally gave in and let him, just to get him out of the house. When he finally left, I realized I made the biggest mistake of my life. I jeopardized my marriage to you and my relationship with Linda. I just hoped no one would find out about my stupidity. "So if he used condoms, how'd you get pregnant?" "He used condoms, but apparently one of them broke. I didn't know it at the time and thought I dodged a bullet. You came home, we made passionate love, and I vowed I'd never fall into that trap again. I had strange sensations a while later and started having morning sickness. I took a home pregnancy test when you were traveling and found out I was 6 weeks pregnant. I was furious. I called him up, cursed him out, and never got near him again. So that's how it happened," I whispered dejectedly. "Yes." That night, when Linda confronted me, I told her the truth. She was so angry she hit me, and I had everything I could do to fight her off. I don't think she spoke to me for a month after that. When she confronted Frank about it, he admitted we had sex and she divorced him. I thought she caught him with a neighbor's wife. That was the story we made up. By that time it was years later, and Tommy was around 4, and I had already decided not to tell you the truth. Linda understood my problem and promised she wouldn't say anything to you. We made it part of their divorce that Frank had to move away and never come back to receive favorable treatment in the divorce. I've never heard or seen him since, and neither has she. So the truth finally comes out. You and Frank, the a-hole, screwing, I spat out bitterly. No wonder he treated me like such a chump. He knew my son was really his and was probably laughing at me the whole time. He knew you both turned me into an unsuspecting cuck for years. Emily studied my face intently. I'm as sorry as I could be, Mark, she said. If I could go back in time, I'd never do anything with him. I never would have gone out drinking with him and let him seduce me. A drunken night of sex with an a-hole has been a sin hanging over my head all these years. I was numb. This was too much information, and I felt exhausted. I got up from the bed and walked toward the door. Please don't go, she pleaded. I want to help you, Mark. I really do. I need you with us. We all do. You have to believe me. I only did it so Tommy could have a decent life and have a great male role model to look up to. She sniffled and whispered, and I need you too. I know it won't be easy to get by this, honey, but I want you so bad. I need you. I tell you I love you, and I have for all these years. I know you might not think so right now, but I do. Linda knows the secret, I cursed angrily. I had to tell her. She kept pressuring me like she already knew. I wondered at the time if Frank had told her already, and she was testing me to see if I'd be truthful with her. Anyone else know about this? I hope not. Suddenly, Emily's face turned even more pale. She lowered her eyes and began to sob into the sheets. Oh, you told somebody else? My parents, she sobbed. What? My God, Emily, what the hell were you thinking? It wasn't me, she exclaimed. Linda told them. They noticed how tall Tommy is and how much he resembles her ex-husband. You know how she is, that woman couldn't keep a secret if she tried. When Mom asked her about it, the truth was written all over her face. When I heard, I was furious. I made them promise not to tell you, and they agreed. I said I'd tell you when Tommy was a teenager. They thought that was wise, and we've all kept quiet about it all these years. Anyone else know you're a cheat, or just your whole family? I sneered. Emily flinched at my insult and squeaked, no. Well, that's something, I guess. Only Linda, your parents, and now me. But I think some other members of the family are suspicious. How can they not be? Tommy's getting taller and looks more like Frank every year. I'm sure he's going to suspect something even if we said nothing. That's why I was definitely going to tell you in a couple more years. I was going to tell you first and then figure out how to handle this so he doesn't feel angry. I've been hiding this secret for him, Mark. I only did what a mother would do to protect her son. You have to believe me. Then she fell back onto the bed and bawled her eyes out. I could still hear her sobbing as I left the room and went out the front door. It was overwhelming, unbelievable. I was in shock as I drove around the town in circles, trying to think straight. I had to hand it to my clever wife. I had no idea about anything. She would have made a great spy in another life. If Mrs. Miller didn't give that damn test to Tommy, I still wouldn't know a thing. I was so conflicted. I hated her, and I loved her. I could understand her reasons why she thought she couldn't tell me, but I wish she had trusted my love enough to come to me. Of course, I might have tried to kill that bastard that screwed her. That would have landed me in jail and, as Emily predicted, would have ruined our family when Tommy was still an infant. Not only that, we never would have had Susan. How could I resent what she did to save our family? I hate her, but I love her. I'm mixed up. I went to a diner and ordered some food. I was hungry but didn't eat much. I kept thinking about what happened to my wonderful life. God, I loved my son. He's such a great kid. And he is my son, not that bastard's, no matter whose sperm created him. All sorts of thoughts were swarming around my head. If Emily was so good at keeping secrets, how could I trust her? Was she telling me the truth about her fidelity over the past 10 years? Maybe there were more skeletons in her closet she hasn't told me. Has she cheated more than she admitted? Was she still cheating on me? How would I know if she was? It took several hours for me to get back to my home. It didn't feel like a home anymore, but where else was I supposed to go? A lonely hotel. When I got there, I saw 2 cars in the driveway and Emily's car in the garage. I walked into the house and found Emily and her sister on the sofa. George and Norma were sitting in chairs next to them. They were drinking wine, and there were half-filled glasses on the coffee table. The DNA papers weren't there. Emily had been crying, and it seemed they were all trying to comfort her. All 4 heads turned in unison and shot me pitiful looks as I entered the house. Oh, I whispered with resentment. They couldn't give me one day to process this information without butting in. George stood and came over with his hand outstretched. "Listen, Mark, we're all really sorry about," he started to say before I cut him off. "Yeah, I'm sure you are. So am I." I went into the kitchen and got a glass of water. I could hear hushed conversation in the living room. After a moment, Emily was standing at the doorway. "Mark, can I talk to you, honey?" I didn't look at her. "Mom and Dad want to talk to you. They understand what you're feeling." "I doubt that. They're as sorry as I am about how this worked out, but they want to help us get through this." George stepped around the corner and said, "I know this is a bad situation, Mark, but you've been a great dad, and I don't want to see your family suffer, son." I answered harshly, "Yeah, right. Turn the other cheek. I know your religion. No divorce, right? 'Cause God won't approve of it. I'm just supposed to accept, forgive, and forget? How do I forgive the cheating and the lying? We can pray about it," George told me. "We can get some counseling for you and Emily. Things can work out." I knew I was too angry to speak to him. I should have just shut up and left, but my mouth began moving and I couldn't stop. "How about you, George? Will God forgive you for lying too? How about your wife and your lying daughter? All these years you've been laughing at your poor dumb son-in-law. What an ignorant fool he is. He can't even keep his wife faithful. He should just keep his mouth shut and raise the kid right." George was startled by my verbal assault. He looked at me with an expression of disbelief at what I said, as if he didn't expect it. Emily's face twisted into a sob, and she went back into the living room crying. I went out the back door and stood on the deck. It was nearly an hour before I heard them leave. They probably didn't know what to say to calm me, and I didn't either. I guess they got the hint, leave me alone for a while. Give me some time to get through this with my sanity. The rest of the week, life moved on. Tommy and Susan were home the next day, and I did everything I could to hide my bitterness from them. I played soccer with my son. I took him to a game on Thursday, and Emily and I cheered him on. He actually scored 2 goals. At home, I played with Susan by the TV. We watched her shows and played house with her dolls and her dollhouse. Emily stayed clear of me most of the time, but as I interacted with my children, I could see her watching me. I saw no reason to take time off from work. It was actually therapeutic to go somewhere besides home. I stayed late a few nights. Working with the robots gave me some relief from my dark thoughts at home. This is not what I planned for my life. Either I go out or forgive Emily. I made the tough decision. A week later, Emily was served. I came home to see her sitting with the documents. Her face was red and her eyes told that she was crying. George and Norma were sitting in chairs next to her. "Why? I thought we moved past it." "No, I never moved past it. I just moved past you. I'm sorry, Emily, but I just cannot trust you anymore. You need to be out of my life for the sake of my own health. I tried over the last week, but I just could not. But our religion does not allow divorce," she sobbed. "What does it say about a wife's duties? Did you follow them? Did you forsake everyone else for me? Don't preach to me what you don't follow. I will be leaving the house for a while and maybe I will not return." "What will you tell the kids?" she asked. I called both Tommy and Susan to the kitchen. They came soon and sat down on the chairs. "Tommy, Susan, Mommy, and Daddy will no longer be living together and will be away from each other forever." George stood up and said, "Don't do it, Mark." They both looked puzzled and looked at me. "Tommy, I want you to know that I am your father and I will always be your father. But you were not born of me. Your biological father is Frank." By now, tears were streaming from my eyes. Emily, meanwhile, collapsed on the floor and was crying. "He is a kid. Spare him," George screamed. "Spare what? Spare him the truth? The truth that his mother is immoral and the truth that his entire family covered up the lies and took his father as a fool. Don't try to lecture me, George. I'm just spitting out facts and truth." I looked at Tommy again and said, "I am sorry, son, but as much as I wanted to be with you, it is not possible for us to be together." Susan was sobbing and said, "I want to live with you, Daddy." I hugged her and said, "I'll always be with both of you. I just might live a little far from you." It was the last time I was with the entire family. I sued Frank and Emily for paternity fraud and asked them to pay for Tommy's upbringing and all the money that I expected from the lawsuit to go to a trust fund for his higher education. To my surprise, Frank was in the hospital due to a heart attack. He was preparing for a bodybuilding competition, and had injected himself with too much steroids. He died a few weeks later. The divorce was final in 7 months. Throughout those 7 months, I got numerous calls. Emily's parents called, the people from the church called. Everyone wanted me to be forgiving and loving. There were times when I almost agreed, but the pain was too much. I just asked them a simple question: what happens if Emily cheats again? Do I still forgive her and be a loving husband? Will I be allowed to have a clean divorce? And will you make sure that you help me get one? No one had any answer. I gave the house to Emily and completely moved out and left town. I know it was a bad move, considering that my daughter Susan was biologically mine. However, at the time, I felt it was the right move. For the next 7 years, I did visit them every 2 months and stayed with them for a week. I never got the opportunity to see them grow up, and it is something I regret. Tommy was always a bit annoyed with me for leaving him, but after so many years, he now understands why I left. He has done very well in soccer. He is the captain of his school soccer team. Susan loves me, and on every trip wants me to come back home. I get to see Emily every time I am back. She has gained weight and has not married or dated anyone in the last 7 years. She looks very old. I am glad that she has her family to support her. I still remember my mom raising me alone. I never wanted this, but I guess it was the only option I had. We do talk, but just as a courtesy. As for me, I am still single and just survive. Deep down, I am still broken, and I know I would never trust any woman ever again. Life sucks, but I carry on alone. Thank you for watching. What would you do if you found out your child isn't biologically yours after so many years? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Until next time.